The rhythmic tap of Clarence Dawes' cane against the cracked pavement of 78th Avenue was as familiar a sound as the morning doves cooing in the eaves of Mrs. Rodriguez's house. 90 years had etched themselves onto his face, a roadmap of wrinkles and laughter lines. But his eyes, the color of faded denim, held a youthful sparkle. Each step was deliberate, each breath a testament to a life well lived. The morning sun, still gentle at this hour, warmed the back of his neck. He felt the familiar contentment settle over him, a quiet peace he carried with him since his days in Korea. He thought fleetingly of the frost-bitten winters, the biting wind whipping across the frozen landscape. Compared to that, this Oakland morning felt like a warm embrace. Morning, Clarence. Mr. Calvin, watering his prize-winning roses, offered a smile as Clarence approached. Mr. Calvin's greeting was a daily ritual, a small, predictable comfort in the unpredictable world. Clarence returned the smile, a genuine warmth spreading through him. Sempre, he replied, the word a quiet echo of a bond forged in fire and steel. He watched a single drop of water cling to a crimson petal, its fragility both beautiful and poignant. It reminded him, strangely, of the fleeting nature of life. How each moment, like that dewdrop, held a delicate beauty that could vanish in an instant. Mr. Calvin's roses, always a vibrant display, seemed even more vibrant today. You look spry this morning, Clarence, Mr. Calvin continued, adjusting the nozzle on his hose. Clarence chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Trying to keep up with you young folks, he replied, his voice laced with gentle self-deprecation. The truth was, some mornings the bones ached, the memories of old wounds flared, but he never let it show. There was a certain pride in keeping up appearances, a discipline ingrained in him from his time in the cause. He continued his walk, the familiar rhythm of his cane a steady beat against the silence. He wondered if Mr. Calvin knew how much those simple greetings meant. Probably not, Clarence mused. People rarely understood the small kindnesses that held a life together, the tiny threads of connection that wove the fabric of a community. He reached the corner store, the bell above the door jingling merrily as he entered. The scent of spices and freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a welcome assault on the senses. Rog, the owner, a man with a perpetually cheerful face and a quick wit, was restocking the shelves. He saw Clarence and a wide grin spread across his face. My favorite Marine, he boomed, his voice echoing through the small store. Clarence felt a familiar warmth spread through him, a simple, uncomplicated pleasure. He knew this was coming, the ritual of the Sunday candy, but it never failed to bring a smile to his face. Don't you go spoiling this old man, Rog, Clarence said, but his eyes twinkled. He knew Roger enjoyed this as much as he did. It was a small, unspoken understanding between them, a shared moment of human connection that transcended the mundane transaction of buying candy. Rog reached under the counter and produced a small bag of peppermint swirls, Clarence's favorite. For you, Clarence, always on the house, he said, placing the bag in Clarence's outstretched hand. Clarence clutched the bag, the smooth plastic cool against his palm. He thought about how simple pleasures, like a piece of peppermint candy, could hold such potent memories. It reminded him of the hard candies his mother used to give him as a boy, a sweet reward for a chore well done. He felt the pang of longing, a sharp, bittersweet ache for a time long gone. He stepped out of the store, the sun now higher in the sky, casting long shadows that stretched and distorted the familiar street scene. He decided to rest for a moment, a weight of his years settling in his bones. He leaned against the brick wall of the store, closing his eyes and breathing deeply. The world, for a moment, faded away. The sounds of traffic, the distant chatter of voices, all receded into a gentle hum. He was back in Korea, feeling the icy wine on his face, the camaraderie of his fellow Marines a tangible warmth against the bitter cold. He opened his eyes, the image of a young, fresh-faced Marine staring back at him from the dusty window of the corner store. He shook his head, a wry smile playing on his lips. Time, he thought, was a relentless river, carrying you along whether you liked it or not. A sudden jostle, a sharp pain in his shoulder, ripped him from his reverie. He felt his feet leave the ground, his body falling, a sickening lurch in his stomach. He landed hard, the breath knocked out of him. The world spun, a dizzying kaleidoscope of colors and blurred shapes. He heard laughter, cruel and sharp, ringing in his ears. He tried to focus, to make sense of what had happened. Through the haze of pain, he saw them. A group of teenagers, their faces contorted in gleeful cruelty, holding up their phones, recording his fall. A wave of nausea washed over him, not just from the pain, but from the utter senselessness of it all. He'd fought for his country, faced down the enemy fire, and now, in his own neighborhood, he was knocked down by a group of children. The thought stung, a deep, throbbing ache in his chest. A woman rushed to his side, her face etched with concern. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice trembling. He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. He could feel the tears welling up, hot and stinging. He blinked them back, ashamed of his own vulnerability. He was a Marine, for God's sake. He wasn't supposed to cry. The laughter of the teenagers faded into the distance, replaced by the concerned murmurs of passers-by. He felt the hand on his arm, gentle but firm. "Let me help you up," the woman said. He nodded, letting her pull him to his feet. The world swam back into focus, the sharp edges of reality returning with a vengeance. He looked around, his gaze settling on the spot where he had fallen. He saw the peppermint swirl scattered across the pavement, crushed and broken. The sight, for some reason, was more painful than a throbbing in his shoulder. It was a small thing, a bag of candy, but it represented something more. It represented the kindness he'd received, the small moments of joy that had punctuated his day. And now, those moments were shattered like the candy on the pavement. The sun, a benevolent eye in the hazy morning sky, warmed Clarence's face. He stood patiently at the crosswalk, his worn canvas shopping bag hanging from his hand. The familiar rhythm of the traffic lights, the distant hum of the city waking, were a comforting symphony to his 90 years. He inhaled deeply, the faint scent of exhaust fumes mingling with the sweetness of nearby blooming jasmine. Another day, another opportunity to appreciate the simple gift of being alive. He'd seen a lot in his time, enough to know that every sunrise was a small victory. His mind drifted, a kaleidoscope of memories, the salty sting of the Pacific, the camaraderie of his fellow Marines, the soft touch of his late wife's hand. A flicker of movement at the periphery of his vision pulled him back to the present. A gaggle of teenagers, boisterous and loud, swaggered towards the crosswalk. He watched them, a familiar pang of something akin to wistful envy twisting in his gut. Their youth, their untarnished optimism. It was a world away from his own quiet existence. He hoped they were good kids. They huddled together, their heads bent over a phone. Their laughter, shrill and high-pitched, echoed off the storefronts. One, taller than the rest, held the phone aloft, filming. Clarence shifted his weight, a vague unease settling in his stomach. They were close now, too close. Their energy, once vibrant, now felt aggressive, intrusive. He tightened his grip on his shopping bag, the worn canvas a small comfort. "Watch this," the tall one muttered, a smirk playing on his lips. Clarence's breath hitched. He'd seen that look before, a chilling disregard that sent a shiver down his spine. Something was about to happen. He tried to step back, a primal instinct to protect himself, but it was too late. A sudden, brutal shove sent him sprawling. The world tilted, the morning sun momentarily eclipsed by a wave of dizziness. He landed hard, the air knocked from his lungs, a sharp, searing pain shot up his arm. He lay there, winded and disoriented, the world a blurry kaleidoscope of color and sound. The teenager's laughter, cruel and sharp, rang in his ears. Damn! He fell like a tree. One of them cackled. Upload that. Tag it. Boom a drop. Their words, devoid of any semblance of human decency, were like daggers to his heart. The world, once a place of comforting routine, now felt hostile, threatening. A wave of nausea washed over him. He squeezed his eyes shut, willing the pain, the humiliation, to disappear. How could they? Didn't they see? He was just an old man. The laughter faded, replaced by the hurried tap-tap-tap of retreating footsteps. Clarence lay there, his body screaming in protest. His breath came in ragged gasps. Shame, hot and prickly, spread through him. He felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped of his dignity. He tried to sit up, but the pain in his arm was excruciating. He groaned, a low, guttural sound of despair. He was alone, abandoned, a world spun. The bright morning sun mocking his helplessness. Had no one seen? Did no one care? A hand, gentle but firm, touched his shoulder. Mr. Doyle. Mr. Doyle. Are you all right? A woman's voice, laced with concern, cut through the haze of pain. He opened his eyes, blinking against the sunlight. A blurry figure knelt beside him, her face etched with worrying. He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. He could only manage a weak nod. Don't try to move, she said softly. Help is on the way. Her words, a bomb to his wounded pride, brought a flicker of hope. He wasn't alone. Someone had seen. Someone cared. Miles away, the video, grainy and shaky, played on Tobias Tank McConnell's phone. His jaw clenched, his hand tightening into a fist. He watched it again, the fury building inside him like a wildfire. Clarence Doyle, 90 years old, a Marine. His blood ran cold. He knew Clarence, a quiet, gentle soul who wouldn't hurt a fly. He slammed his fist on the table, the force of the impact rattling the coffee cups. Those little bastards, he growled, his voice thick with rage. He wouldn't let this stand, not a chance in hell. He picked up his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. Time to rally the troops. The message, terse and urgent, spread through the network like lightning. Moloch Wynne, Denise Carter, Rico Figueroa. Names and faces from different eras, different battles, united by a single, unwavering code. They saw the video, they felt the same white-hot rage. They responded without hesitation. Within minutes, a network of Marines, spanning generations and continents, was mobilized. They were coming. The teenager who had shoved Clarence, watched the video replay on his phone. The laughter of his friends, once exhilarating, now sounded hollow, grating. He saw the old man's face, etched with pain and confusion, and a flicker of unease twisted in his gut. He hadn't meant for him to fall. It was just a prank. A stupid, harmless prank, wasn't it? He glanced at Ty, the youngest of the group, who sat silently, his eyes fixed on the phone, his face pale. Man, that was messed up. Ty mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. Ree's unease intensified. He shoved his phone into his pocket, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling of guilt. It was just a video. It would blow over, wouldn't it? The crisp morning air, usually a balm to Clarence's lungs, now felt thin and insufficient. The world swam around him, a disorienting kaleidoscope of brick and sky. He lay sprawled on the cracked pavement of 78 and MacArthur, the sharp sting in his hip vying with the dull ache in his shoulder. For a moment, he couldn't quite grasp what had happened. One minute he was enjoying Mr. Kelvin's cheerful morning, Clarence, anticipating Rod's Sunday candy treat, and the next this. Distantly, he registered a cacophony of no's, shrill laughter, then a woman's sharp voice cutting through the air like a siren. Hey, what the hell is wrong with you? Clarence blinked, his vision slowly focusing on a cluster of sneakers surrounding him. He recognized them. The group of teenagers who often congregated near the corner store, their eyes usually glued to their phones. They weren't looking at their phones now, they were looking at him. And their laughter, though fading, still held a chilling echo of amusement. The tallest one, the one who'd shoved him, shifted uneasily. Damn. Old man went down hard. He hadn't meant to push him that hard. Just enough for the video. Just enough for the likes. Now, this lady was making a big deal out of it. He forced a nonchalant shrug. Chill. Lady. He's fine. It was just a joke. A joke? The woman's voice rose in disbelief. Her hands, still clutching grocery bags, trembled. Milk cartons clinked inside. A joke? He could have broken his back. She knelt beside Clarence, her face etched with concern. Sir, are you all right? Can you hear me? Clarence tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. A wave of nausea washed over him. The world tilted again, and he squeezed his eyes shut. Disgraceful, at my age, sprawled on the pavement like a. He couldn't even find a word. Shame, hot and prickly, spread through him. He'd always prided himself on his independence, his resilience. Now, he was nothing but a fragile old man, knocked down by a gust of teenage idiocy. Dude was in the way, muttered another boy, his voice sullen. He kicked a loose pebble across the sidewalk, avoiding the woman's gaze. Internally, though, a flicker of unease began to gnaw at him. Maybe we went too far. He glanced at Tai, the youngest of the group. Tai's face was pale, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. He'd been the one filming. He's 90, the woman snapped, her voice thick with anger. She fumbled in her purse for her phone. Someone call an ambulance. The laughter had stopped completely. The boys exchanged nervous glances. The easy bravado they'd worn moments before had evaporated, replaced by a dawning realization that their joke had gone horribly wrong. A man across the street, witnessing the scene, dialed 911. The rhythmic tapping of his fingers against the phone screen punctuated the sudden, heavy silence. Reese swallowed hard, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. His phone, clutched in his hand, felt suddenly heavy, incriminating. The video, meant to be a source of amusement, now seemed like a damning piece of evidence. Shit. Across town, Tobias Tank McConnell's phone buzzed with a notification. Malik Wynn, a younger Marine he'd mentored, had tagged him in a video. Tank, now a private security contractor, still retained the sharp instincts honed through years of service. He clicked on the link, his eyes narrowing as he watched the grainy footage. The blood drained from his face. He knew that gate, at Ramrod's straight posture, even hunched over in pain on the ground. Clarence, son of a Tank's voice was low, dangerous. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the coffee cups. His wife, accustomed to his occasional outbursts, merely raised an eyebrow from behind her newspaper. Within minutes, Tank was on the phone, his voice clipped and authoritative. Denise, Malik, Rico, get your asses over here. Now, he didn't need to explain. The video, spreading like wildfire through their network of Marines, spoke for itself. Denise Carter, a retired master sergeant, felt a cold fury clench her gut as she watched the video. Clarence, a gentle soul, a man who'd served his country with honor, treated like this. Unacceptable. She grabbed her keys, her movements brisk and efficient. Malik, still reeling from the shock of the video, forwarded it to his contacts, his fingers flying across the keyboard. They messed with the wrong old man. A wave of protective anger, fierce and unwavering, surged through him. Clarence had always been kind to him, offering advice and a listening ear. Now, it was his turn to step up. Rico Figueroa, younger than Malik, but no less fiercely loyal to the cause, felt a similar surge of protectiveness. He didn't know Clarence personally, but that didn't matter. He was a Marine, and Marines looked out for their own. He threw on his jacket, a grim determination settling over his features. Those punks are going to learn a lesson. Back on 78th and MacArthur, the ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. The woman with the groceries remained by Clarence's side, murmuring words of comfort. He tried to focus on her voice, a small beacon of kindness in the swirling chaos. He felt the hand on his shoulder, gentle but firm. "Help is on the way, sir," the woman said, her voice soothing. "Just hang in there." Clarence took a shaky breath, the pain radiating through his body, a stark reminder of his vulnerability. But amidst the pain, a flicker of something else began to stir. Gratitude for the woman's kindness, for the approaching sirens, for the knowledge that he wasn't alone. He closed his eyes, a silent prayer forming on his lips. Thank you. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew, with a certainty that ran deeper than the pain, that he would face it with the same resilience he'd always shown, the same unwavering spirit that had carried him through the trials of war and the long years that followed. He was a Marine, and Marines never give up. The morning sun, a hazy gold disk through the lingering city smog, warmed the cracked pavement of 78th Avenue. A robin perched on a telephone wire, its cheerful chirping a stark contrast to the scene unfolding below. A small crowd had gathered, a ripple of murmurs and hushed gasps emanating from its center. Dust motes danced in the oblique rays of sunlight, illuminating the stark tableau of an elderly man sprawled on the sidewalk. Hidden in the periphery, a young man, barely out of his teens, held his phone aloft, the camera lens trained on the unfolding drama. His fingers, slick with nervous sweat, tightened around the device. He felt the strange detachment, a coldness gripping his chest. The scene before him felt unreal, like a badly acted play. He watched as a woman knelt beside the fallen man, her voice a frantic mix of concern and anger directed at the retreating figures of 5 teenagers. He knew those teens. He saw them almost every day, their swaggering bravado a constant presence on these streets. He'd never thought much of them, dismissing them as nosy and irritating, but harmless. This was different. The fallen man, he knew, was Mr. Doyle, a fixture in the neighborhood. Mr. Doyle took his morning walk with the precision of a clock. Every morning, he exchanged a friendly nod with Mr. Kelvin, a retired postal worker from two doors down. Every Sunday, Roger at the corner store slipped him a free piece of butterscotch candy, a silent acknowledgement of the veteran's sweet tooth. Small acts of kindness, the invisible threads that held the fabric of their community together. Now, those threads felt frayed, stretched to their breaking point. His thumb hovered over the screen, his heart hammering against his ribs. He zoomed in on Mr. Doyle's face, a mask of pain etched with bewilderment. He saw the tremor in the old man's hand as he tried to push himself up, the winds that contorted his features. A wave of nausea washed over him, a sickening realization of the weight of what he'd just witnessed. He wasn't just a spectator, he was a witness. He opened his messaging app, navigating to the group chat. The familiar names of his fellow Marines scrolled past, each one a symbol of the brotherhood that bound them, the shared experiences that had forged an unbreakable loyalty. His fingers, still trembling slightly, typed out the message, each letter a heavy weight on his conscience. They got dull. The message hung in the digital space for a moment, a silent detonation. Then, the chat exploded, miles away. Tobias Tank McConnell, a former gunnery sergeant now running his own private security firm, felt a jolt of adrenaline surge through him. He was in the middle of a client meeting, the drone of corporate jargon washing over him, when his phone vibrated. He glanced at the notification, his eyes narrowing as he read the message. Dahl. The name resonated with a deep sense of respect, a memory of firm handshakes and quiet wisdom shared over countless cups of coffee. He excused himself from the meeting, his mind already racing. They got Dahl. What the hell did that mean? He opened the chat, scrolling through the frantic messages flooding the screen. He scanned the short video clip someone had posted, his blood turning to ice. Malik Wynn, a younger Marine with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue, saw the message while waiting for a delayed flight. He'd met Dahl at a local veterans event, instantly drawn to the older man's quiet dignity and the twinkle in his eyes that spoke of a life well lived. He felt the surge of protective anger. Dahl, of all people, he felt the familiar pull of duty, the ingrained instinct to protect his own. He immediately began making calls, his network of contacts spreading the word like wildfire. Retired Master Sergeant Denise Carter was at the gym, pushing herself through her morning workout. When she received the message, she stopped mid-rep, her breath catching in her throat. Dahl. He'd been a mentor, a source of unwavering support during her early years in the cause. She felt a cold fury settle in her stomach. Nobody messed with her Marines, nobody. She grabbed her phone, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she coordinated with Tank and Malik, her voice crisp and efficient. Time was of the essence. Across the city, the message reverberated, a call to arms echoing through the tight-knit community of Marines. Rico Figueroa, a young corporal with a heart of gold, was on his way to work when he saw the message. He felt the pang of guilt. He'd meant to visit Dahl, to check in on him, but life had gotten in the way. Now this. He slammed his fist on the steering wheel, a surge of frustration and anger coursing through him. He made a sharp U-turn, the tire screeching in protest. He was going to find out who did this. Back on 78th Avenue, the crowd dispersed, leaving a lingering sense of unease in the air. The young man who had filmed the incident lowered his phone, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He knew what he had to do. He had to tell the truth. He had to make things right. He walked towards the police officers who had arrived on the scene, his steps heavy, his heart pounding in his chest. Across town, in a dimly lit basement, Raheem Jennings, the teenager who had shoved Mr. Dahl, watched the video replaying on his phone. He'd expected to feel a thrill, the rush of adrenaline that came with viral notoriety. Instead, he felt a hollow ache in his chest. He saw the fear in Mr. Dahl's eyes, the bewilderment on his face. He'd seen that look before, in his grandmother's eyes when she'd fallen and broken her hip. He scrolled through the comments, flooding the video, a rising tide of condemnation and outrage. He felt the knot of fear tighten in his stomach. He hadn't thought about the consequences. Beside him, Ty, the youngest of the group, stared at the screen, his face pale. He'd been swept along by the bravado of the others, caught in the intoxicating allure of social media infamy. Now, the reality of what they had done crashed down on him, a crushing weight of guilt and shame. He'd seen Mr. Dahl walking his dog in the park, the gentle way he spoke to the children playing nearby. He wasn't just some old man, he was a person, a kind person. He swallowed hard, his throat constricting with unshed tears. He had made a terrible mistake. The message, "They got Dahl," had been a ripple in the still waters of the morning. Now, it was a tidal wave, gathering momentum, its force about to crash down on those responsible. The Marines were coming. The morning air, crisp with the promise of a warm day, hung heavy with a sudden, chilling stillness. The usual cacophony of 78th and MacArthur. The rumble of buses, the distant car horns, the cheerful greetings of neighbors, had been replaced by tense, brittle silence. Clarence Dorr, a man whose 90 years had etched themselves onto his face like lines on a weathered map, lay on the asphalt, a small island amidst the growing crowd. He felt the strange disconnect, as though observing the scene from a great height. "This isn't happening," a voice whispered in the recesses of his mind, even as a sharp pain throbbed in his hip. "Not here. Not to me." He'd walked these streets for decades, each crack in the pavement, each storefront a familiar friend. Now, this familiarity was tainted, stained with the acrid taste of fear and bewilderment. The teens, the ones who had shoved him, stood frozen, their earlier bravado replaced by a palpable terror. Their eyes darted nervously, their shallow breaths catching in their throats. Ree, the one who'd actually pushed him, felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Stupid, stupid, stupid," he chanted internally, his bravado crumbling under the weight of the situation. He hadn't anticipated this. He hadn't imagined the old man would actually fall. He'd just wanted a few likes, a viral moment. Now, looking at Mr. Dorr's crumpled form, the reality of his action slammed into him with the force of a freight train. Ty, the youngest of the group, shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the ground. He felt the sick lurch in his gut, a deep, knowing regret. He'd gone along with it. Hadn't he? Hadn't spoken up. Hadn't stopped Ree. He stole a glance at Mr. Dorr, his heart clenching at the sight of the old man's pain. "I'm sorry," he thought, the words a silent, desperate plea. "I'm so sorry." The woman with the groceries knelt beside Clarence, her face a mask of concern. "Are you all right, dear? Can you hear me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Her hands hovered over him, wanting to comfort but hesitant to touch, afraid of causing further pain. The kindness in her eyes, the genuine whirring edge on her face, was a small beacon in the swirling chaos. Clarence tried to speak, to reassure her, but the words caught in his throat. He managed a weak nod, a small gesture of gratitude. He felt the wave of warmth wash over him, a small ember of hope flickering in the darkness. Not everyone is cruel, he thought, clinging to the thought like a lifeline. Mr. Calvin, his neighbor from across the street, stood on the edge of the crowd, his face etched with worrying. He saw Clarence every morning, a cheerful greeting exchanged as the old man embarked on his daily walk. Seeing him lying there, vulnerable and hurt, sent a jolt of anger through him. "Those punks," he thought, his fists clenching at his sides. "They'll pay for this, then." A shift, a subtle change in the atmosphere. The crowd parted slightly, and a group of men and women appeared, their presence radiating a quiet authority. They moved with a precision, a shared understanding that spoke of years of shared experience. Tobias Tank McConnell, a former gunnery sergeant, his frame as solid and imposing as his nickname suggested, surveyed the scene with a practiced eye. He'd seen the video, the sickening thud of the fall echoing in his mind. "No one touches one of our own," he thought, his gaze sweeping over the teenagers. "No one." Behind him, Moloch Wynne, a younger Marine who knew Clarence from the local VA, nodded curtly. He'd called Tank the moment he saw the footage, the image of the elderly veteran on the ground igniting a fierce protective instinct within him. He knew Clarence, a kind, gentle soul who always had a smile and a story to share. Seeing him hurt, violated like this, was a personal affront. Denise Carter, a retired master sergeant, her presence radiating a quiet strength, stepped forward. She knelt beside the woman with the groceries, her voice calm and reassuring. He needs space. Step back. Let the paramedics work when they get here. Her words, though spoken softly, carried an undeniable weight, and the crowd instinctively obeyed. Rico Figueroa, another younger Marine, stood slightly apart, scanning the perimeter, his eyes alert for any potential threats. He'd dropped everything the moment he'd gotten Malik's call. The Marine network, he knew, was a powerful force, and when one of their own was down, they responded. The teenagers shrank back under the Marines' steady gazes. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Reese swallowed hard. His earlier bravado completely evaporated. He felt the cold dread creep up his spine, a chilling premonition of the consequences he was about to face. He glanced at Tai, who stood beside him, his face pale and drawn. He saw a flicker of fear in the younger beau's eyes, a shared understanding of the gravity of their actions. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. The arrival of the paramedics signaled a shift, a transition from the immediate aftermath to the long, slow process of healing and justice. But the presence of the Marines, their silent vigil around Clarence's door, sent a clear message. He was not alone. He was one of them, and they would not abandon him. The fluorescent lights of the convenience store burst, a stark contrast to the fading afternoon sun outside. His heart hammering against his ribs, shoved past a rack of chips, the metallic tang of artificial cheese, and an onion filling his nostrils. Just moments ago, the laughter had been raucous, echoing the adrenaline rush of their prank. Now, a chilling silence had descended, broken only by Tai's ragged breathing. He could taste the metallic tang of fear, bitter and acidic on his tongue. Stupid, 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 he thought, the words a frantic drumbeat in his head. He hadn't expected this. He'd seen those kinds of videos before, the ones that went viral. Quick bursts of shock and awe, followed by fleeting internet fame. This was supposed to be like that, fun, harmless. But the old man's crumpled form, the way his cane had clattered against the pavement, that image was seared into his mind, a grotesque loop playing on repeat. Yo. They're outside, Jamal muttered, his voice barely a whisper. His face, usually brimming with bravado, was pale, his eyes wide with a dawning horror he was only beginning to comprehend. The group huddled near the grimy window, peering through the faded advertisements plastered across the glass. Reese swallowed hard. Outside, a group of men stood, their postures rigid, their faces grim. They weren't just any men. They were different. Something about the way they held themselves, the quiet intensity in their eyes, radiated an aura of disciplined power. Ree recognized the insignia on their jackets, the eagle, the globe, the anchor. Marines. A cold dread seeped into Ree's bones, spreading through him like ice water. He'd heard stories about the Marines, about their unwavering loyalty, their fierce protectiveness. This wasn't some online beef, some keyboard warrior showdown. This was real. This was consequences. He glanced at his friends, their faces mirroring his own fear. The bravado, the swagger, it had all evaporated, leaving behind a raw, exposed vulnerability. Tai, the youngest of the group, shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the worn linoleum floor. I didn't want to do it, he mumbled, his voice thick with tears. I told you guys it wasn't right. The words hung in the air, heavy with regret. Ree felt a flicker of annoyance. Too little, too late. But the annoyance was quickly swallowed by the rising tide of his own fear. I'm sorry, Tai said again, the words directed at the unseen figures outside, at the old man they had wronged. The apology, so fragile, so inadequate, echoed the hollowness in Ree's own soul. A heavy hand landed on Ree's shoulder. He flinched, turning to see Tank, his face impassive, his eyes boring into him. You pushed him. Hone it. Tang's voice was low, a rumble that vibrated through Ri. There was no anger in it, just a chilling, unwavering certainty. It was the voice of someone who had seen too much, someone who understood the weight of actions, the permanence of consequences. Ri opened his mouth to speak, to offer some excuse, some justification, but the words caught in his throat. What could he say? That it was just a joke? That they didn't mean any harm? The words felt hollow, meaningless, even to him. He looked away, shame burning in his chest. You think this is a movie? Tank's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a razor. You think people are props in your phone? Each word landed like a punch, shattering the illusion of detached amusement they had clung to. Ri could feel the weight of every stare in the store, the silent judgment of the cashier, the disdain in the eyes of the other customers. He had never felt so exposed, so utterly stripped bare. Come on, Tank said, his grip tightening on Ri's shoulder. Let's go talk to Mr. Doll. The walk outside felt like an eternity. Each step was heavy, laden with the weight of his guilt. The sunlight, once a symbol of freedom and possibility, now felt like a spotlight, exposing him for who he was. He saw the old man sitting on a bench, surrounded by the Marines. Clarence Doll, the name, once just a random target, now held a weight, a significance he hadn't grasped before. He was no longer just some old guy. He was a person, a veteran, a member of his community, and they had violated him, his dignity, his peace. As they approached, a woman stepped forward, her eyes blazing with anger. You should be ashamed of yourselves, she hissed, her voice shaking with fury. Ri flinched, the words a physical blow. He had never seen such raw, unadulterated anger directed at him. It was terrifying and deserved. He saw Clarence Doll looking at him, not with anger, but with a quiet sadness that pierced him deeper than any rage could have. In that moment, Ri understood. He understood the enormity of what he had done, the ripple effect of his thoughtless cruelty. He had not just hurt an old man, he had fractured something precious within the community. Something he now realized he'd been a part of all along. The corner store, the familiar faces, the shared routines, it was all connected. A delicate web of human connection he had carelessly torn. And in that tearing, he had torn a piece of himself as well. The muted hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed in Clarence's ears, a distant drone against the throbbing ache in his hip. His eyelids felt heavy, weighted down by an unseen force. He tried to open them, the effort a monumental task, and a world swam into blurry focus. Sterile white walls, the sharp scent of antiseptic, and a dark head bent over a phone. The young man looked up, his face breaking into a relieved grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Clarence, you're awake. Clarence blinked, his mind sluggish, trying to piece together the fractured memories. The crisp autumn air, Calvin's cheerful greeting, the sudden shove of darkness. Hospital, he croaked, his voice raspy. He tried to shift, a sharp pain lancing through his hip. Easy there, Moloch said, gently placing a hand on his arm. He felt the surge of protectiveness towards the old man, the sight of his frailty sparking a quiet rage he kept tightly leashed. He'd sat there for hours, replaying the video, the casual cruelty of those kids burning in his gut. He saw the fear flicker in Clarence's eyes, the sudden loss of balance, the sickening thud as he hit the pavement. He'd seen enough violence to know the fall could have been so much worse. What happened? Clarence asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. You had a fall, Moloch replied, choosing his words carefully. He wanted to downplay the incident, to shield Clarence from the ugliness of it all, at least for now. Telling him a group of teenagers had assaulted him, filmed it, and posted it online felt like adding insult to injury. You're at Highland Hospital. You hit your head pretty hard. Clarence winced, a wave of nausea washing over him. He ran a trembling hand over his forehead, feeling a dull ache beneath the bandages. The memories began to resurface, sharp and unwelcome. The laughter, the jeers, the feeling of being weightless for a terrifying moment before the world went black. A tremor of fear ran through him, the vulnerability unsettling. He'd always prided himself on his independence, his daily walks a symbol of his enduring strength. Now, lying here, tethered to machines, he felt the chilling sense of helplessness. Toes, Clarence stammered, the words catching in his throat. The image of their faces, contorted in gleeful malice, flashed in his mind. He closed his eyes, trying to banish the memory, but it lingered, a dark stain on the edges of his consciousness. Malik's jaw tightened. They're being dealt with, he said, his voice low and controlled. Internally, he raged. He wanted to find those kids, to make them understand the gravity of what they had done. But he also knew Clarence wouldn't want him to act rashly. The man had always been a voice of reason, a steady presence in the swirling chaos of life. Clarence opened his eyes, a strange mixture of sadness and resolve in their depths. I better be, he chuckled weakly. Can't have you all wasting time on a corpse. Despite the humor in his voice, Moloch saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, the realization of his own mortality. He reached out and squeezed Clarence's hand, a silent reassurance. You're tough, Clarence, Moloch said, his voice softening. You'll be back on your feet in no time. He meant it. He'd seen Clarence weather tougher storms than this. The man was a survivor, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Clarence sighed, a deep, shuddering breath. I don't want jail for them, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Moloch stiffened, surprise rippling through him. He'd expected anger, demands for retribution, anything but this. But Clarence, he started, his voice laced with incredulity. He thought of the video, of the callous disregard for human life, of the ripple effect of fear and anger it had spread through the community. He thought of the other Marines. Tank, Denise, Rico, their faces hardened with resolve, ready to exact justice. I know, son, Clarence interrupted, his gaze distant. I know what you're thinking, but jail won't teach them anything. It'll just make them angrier, more bitter. He paused, gathering his strength. They're young, they made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but they deserve a chance to learn from it. He turned his head slightly, meeting Alex's gaze. They need to understand what they did, not just be punished for it. Moloch stared at him, his mind reeling. He'd expected fire and brimstone, not this quiet wisdom. He'd spent his life adhering to a strict code of honor, where actions had consequences, where justice demanded retribution. But Clarence's words resonated with a different kind of truth, a deeper understanding of the human condition. He saw the pain in the old man's eyes, the weariness of a life lived, the quiet strength that came from choosing forgiveness over vengeance. He thought of his own youthful indiscretions, the mistakes he'd made, the second chances he'd been given. He slowly nodded, a reluctant acceptance dawning within him. Okay, Clarence, he said softly. We'll find another way. He knew it wouldn't be easy, the others wouldn't understand, but he would find a way to honor Clarence's wishes, to find a path towards justice that didn't lead to further destruction. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Clarence's porch, chapeling the warm wood with a mosaic of light and shade. He paused at the gate, his hand resting on the cool metal, a faint ache throbbing in his hip. It was a constant reminder of the fall, a dull echo of the impact. He'd been hesitant to return home, to the place where the world had tilted, where the laughter of children had morphed into a cruel soundtrack to his humiliation. But the hospital stay, the sterile white walls and the constant beeping of machines, had worn him down. He longed for the familiar creak of his porch swing, the comforting scent of Mrs. Henderson's roses blooming next door. He took a deep breath, a tremor running through him, and pushed open the gate. He hadn't realized how much courage it would take to simply walk through his own gate again. What if? He pushed the thought away. He was Clarence Endall, a Marine. He wouldn't let fear cripple him. As he stepped onto the porch, a burst of color caught his eye. A vibrant mural adorned the sidewalk leading to his door. Bold, primary colors swirled together, forming a powerful image of a pair of boots mid-stride. Beneath the words "Respect the walk," Clarence stared, his heart swelling with an emotion he couldn't quite name. It was more than gratitude, more than relief. It was a sense of belonging, of being seen and valued. He traced the words with his fingertip, the rough texture of the paint a stark contrast to the smooth, polished surface of his memories. The memories of the fall, the mocking laughter, the searing pain. They were still there, sharp and vivid. But now, they were overlaid with something new, something hopeful. His sidewalk, was a testament to the goodness that still existed in the world. He heard a shuffling sound behind him and turned to see Mr. Calvin, his neighbor, approaching with a hesitant smile. "Clarence, welcome home. We've been worried about you." Mr. Calvin's voice was gentle, tinged with concern. Clarence felt a warmth spread through him, melting the icy knot in his stomach. "It's good to be back, Calvin," he replied, his voice a little raspy from the Suze. He saw the genuine relief in his neighbor's eyes, a reflection of the shared bond they held within this small community. Inside, his home was filled with the aroma of freshly baked apple pie. A group of people were gathered in his living room, their faces a mix of familiar and unfamiliar. Rog, the owner of the corner store, beamed at him, holding out a bag of his favorite lemon drops. "Welcome back, Mr. Dole. We missed you." The woman with the groceries, the one who had rushed to his side after the fall, stood beside Rog, eyes filled with a quiet strength. "How are you feeling, Clarence?" she asked, a voice laced with genuine concern. Clarence took the candy, a small gesture that felt immensely comforting. "Better than I deserve," he chuckled, his voice still weak. The words felt true. The outpouring of support, the kindness in their eyes. It was more than he could have ever expected. Then he saw them, the bows, standing awkwardly near the fireplace, their heads bowed, their fidgeting hands revealing their nervousness. He felt the pang of something, the anger, not resentment, but a deep, abiding sadness. They looked so young, so lost. He recognized Ree, the one who had shoved him. Debo's eyes met his, a flicker of fear, of shame. Clarence's heart clenched. Tobias Tank McConnell, a former gunnery sergeant and a reassuring presence, stepped forward. "Clarence, these young men have something they want to say to you." He placed a hand on Ree's shoulder, a gesture that seemed both supportive and firm. Ree swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "Mr. Dorr," he began, his voice barely a whisper. We're so sorry." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions. The other boys murmured their agreement, their heads still bowed. Clarence could feel their fear, their regret, radiating outwards like waves. He thought of his own youth, the mistakes he'd made, the times he'd needed a second chance. He took a deep breath and met Ree's gaze. "Why'd you forgive us so fast?" Ree asked, his voice choked with emotion. The question caught Clarence off guard. He hadn't even realized he had forgiven them. It wasn't a conscious decision, more like a slow thawing of the ice around his heart. "Because someone forgave me once, too," he said softly, his voice filled with a quiet understanding. "We don't grow if nobody gives us space to change." The tension in the room seemed to ease, replaced by a fragile sense of hope. I think you all just didn't know better, but now you do. He looked at each of them, his gaze lingering on Tai, the youngest, who seemed genuinely remorseful. Debo's eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and something akin to respect. Clarence felt a flicker of warmth within him. Maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all of this. The mural outside, the gathered community, the bow standing before him, heads bowed. They were all part of a story that was still being written, and Clarence, despite the lingering ache in his hip, felt a renewed sense of purpose. His walk, his life, had been irrevocably changed, but perhaps, just perhaps, it had been changed for the better.